Monday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day and welcome to our City Council meeting. I am opening up the meeting at 7:02. I have been starting the meetings with a moment of mindfulness, and so I invite you to join us now up here at Council to start the meeting with a couple relaxation breaths. So this is a great way to have a mini break in your day to transition from what you were doing.
Recording in progress.
And coming into this room and space with City Council. And it isn't mandatory if you don't feel like doing this. That's okay, so you can sit quietly. And you can keep your eyes open or closed. Please bring attention to how you are sitting. Find a way to be relaxed and alert. And bring attention to your breath. We will take 3 big inhales and exhales. Exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Give yourself permission to let go of this busy day and come present into our meeting space. And I want to express my gratitude for being a part and involved in your local government and watching tonight. Everybody on City Council are public servants. They are residents first, and they're neighbors, and they have full-time jobs, and they avail themselves to the city to better our community. I invite you to be curious, thoughtful, compassionate, and open as we discuss city business tonight. All right. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Here.
Councilmember Leaks May. Councilmember Mikulski. Here. Councilmember Polika.
Here.
And Mayor Piana.
Here. And next up is the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Moved by Polika and seconded by Councilwoman James. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Yes.
Councilmember Polika.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May.
Approval of agenda?
Yes. And Mayor Piana.
Yes. Next up is a recognition of our electronic meeting procedures, which we're still doing hybrid public audience call in, and we'll go over those directions at the time. And then next up is our first presentations. We have 2 tonight. And the first presentation is 5A, which is Annual Report Update from the Ferndale Housing Commission. And welcome, Heather. It's been good to see you. It's been a while.
Hello. Thank you so much for making some time for me tonight. Now, to find... Sorry, I'm not seeing it. Sorry, Marnie, is it here on the desktop?
I did.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I'm just not seeing it. I have it on a thumb drive if I need it. That's what I clicked on. I've got it on a thumb drive. Will that work? I know. But that doesn't help me for the, oh wait, would it be under more presentation?
And you're here.
I apologize. Thumb drive? Wait, is it on the desktop? Oh, in the middle. Okay, there, thank you. It has been a while. Thank you for your patience while I...
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to update council and the community on what we've been working on at the Ferndale Housing Commission, what we've accomplished in the last year, and what the future ahead might hold for us. Just to update the community on the Ferndale Housing Commission and our programs, I wanted to start with, how do I make this go away? With our two primary programs. At the Housing Commission, we have the public housing program, which is the actual physical properties that we own and operate here in the city of Ferndale. We have 166 affordable housing units. They're all in the city of Ferndale. We have two buildings, one at 500 East 9 Mile and one at 415 Withington. And then we also have 43 scattered site homes. So that's our public housing program. We also operate a housing choice voucher program, which some people know better by Section 8, is a term that's often used for that program. But through the housing choice voucher program, we're able to assist usually in the neighborhood of 860-ish families at a time. We're authorized for 975, but we only have budget to cover around 860 some families at a time. And those vouchers can be used anywhere in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties. So those have a larger footprint and certainly serve more families. I wanted to give the community a reminder of how we're structured in terms of governance and funding. The citizens, the residents here in Ferndale, obviously elect City Council, which appoints our Board of Commissioners at the Housing Commission. We are funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. So that's our funding source. And then the Board of Commissioners is responsible and responsive to our actual residents and program participants. And then we as staff report through that Board of Commissioners. And they appoint me, the Executive Director. And I work with our staff and our program participants. I wanted to highlight that we just elected a new president, Dan Martin, for our president of our Board of Commissioners. And our vice president is Reginald Sutherland, and then our board members, Jennifer Bentley, Deanna Wiltsey, and Donnie Johnson. Our mission is to go beyond housing and really focus on home and how we help our families and program participants build a strong community tie, to feel secure and welcome within the community, to not just offer housing, but really try to create safe space and home for them. Our vision includes creating units that really can support that and feel like home and be a source of pride, not only for the families that reside there, but also for the community, to really create that close tie between our families, our mission, and the community that we serve. In terms of our values, we spend some time each year when we do our strategic planning reviewing these values, and we try to see that these kind of ripple through everything we do. All of our policies, our practices, how we approach our work, how we interact with people day to day, and just make sure that they're kind of a guidepost for us. So you'll see these in our personnel handbook, our resident handbook, in our policy manuals. You'll see these values repeated, and we really try to bring them to life in our work every day. So looking back over the last year or so, time is so fluid in these times, we were able to do our strategic planning. We focused quite a bit on a desire to be more active when it comes to advocacy, and we undertook an inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism, we call it IDEA for short, initiative. And we also prepared an annual report that's available on our website, and I believe it was shared with council, kind of by the numbers look at what we've done over the last year. In our public housing program, We're really proud of the work that we were able to do in supportive services. We received a couple years ago, just pre-pandemic, we got what's called a ROS grant from HUD, and that's Resident Opportunity and Self-Sufficiency, all these, letters, but basically it funds a social worker and also some staff time to do activities and enrichment planning around some particular areas of interest. So we've been really excited about our work there. We had to switch gears quickly and dedicate a lot of time and energy around COVID response. So we had vaccine and booster clinics on site. We've done flu shot clinics. Just like everywhere else, we've had to change gears as far as how we, sanitize and just operate, and how do we do things remotely, and how do we kind of change everything to fit, what we've lived through the last couple of years. So we spent quite a bit of time on that. One thing that we did early on, when we realized that we were all going to be inside for a long haul, we put in computer labs in both buildings, and we wired both of our buildings for Wi-Fi, trying to make sure that people had that connectivity that they would need to stay home and stay safe. We also did some little things like updated the laundry rooms, got our outside spaces kind of refreshed, knowing that people were going to need, need to make use of some of those common spaces differently. We also streamlined some of our work processes, and we introduced an online rent pay portal. So we're kind of like inching into the modern age as far as how we're doing some of our business transactions. So we're hopeful that people will find that convenient and use it more and more, not only because it's more convenient in COVID times to be able to pay online rather than go and get a money order or write a check or what have you, but it also helps to build their financial literacy, and we're hoping to have more people get bank accounts and use those types of tools. On the housing choice voucher side, one thing that we were really excited about was being involved in the source of income discrimination advocacy work that's happened, and we really appreciate this body's approval of the ordinance to support that. We think that'll make a big difference with our voucher program, opening access to families in different areas. One thing that we did right when COVID began is we expedited how we do our payment standards, so that we made sure that we got as much money out as quickly as we could for families that would be struggling. We also worked a little bit on landlord outreach, trying to, expand opportunity for families in different areas. The one thing I did want to focus in on was this IDEA initiative, because we spent quite a bit of time over the last year working on this. And so I wanted to take a few minutes and just focus in on that. So when we first wanted to tackle how we were going to, handle this initiative, we knew that we didn't want to do it ourselves. We knew that it was going to be important to, engage with someone who had expertise in this, and to really work with the community, as well as our program participants. So we put out an RFP, we entertained some different proposals, and we were lucky to find expertise close to home in the form of Latash Consulting, and Kathleen Latash and her team that included Crescenda Brown was able to work with us on this project. So the first thing that they did was enlist a selection committee to help us identify a task force that could really support this work. So with that, I kind of want to introduce Kathleen to help me with this portion of the presentation. Do you want to take it away? Okay.
Sure. My granny glasses on here. So thank you for making space in tonight's agenda to hear about really the remarkable work that Heather and the Ferndale Housing Commission have done over the past year. I mean, they've really done an outstanding job, and it was a pleasure to work with them and serve as their inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism consultant. So the process was really important, and Heather asked me to speak about the process that we engaged in. And that, if I boil it down, there were really three key ingredients that made it really, really supportive. And one was that the process was rooted in an understanding that we needed to gather information from the people most impacted by the system. In order to do this, we created a survey and ended up gathering 263 completed surveys, plenty of information to provide important direction. We also conducted some individual interviews to gather some additional contexting information, provide detail for what we were learning from the survey data. And then all the data later was collected and reviewed by the task force members to identify areas of growth. So it was just a huge amount of really important information. Second, we engaged residents in the public housing program and also housing choice voucher participants to be involved in the task force itself. They were the ones reviewing the data and making recommendations directly to the board. So all of the recommendations came from people who were living this life, living in the public housing system, reviewing the data from their own peers, and then making recommendations directly to the board. So as part of this, we had to have a task force. So we put out a public invitation to anyone who was in the system, and it resulted in 27 different applications. That was a little bit more than we wanted. We had narrowed it down to a much smaller level. And so in order to narrow it down, we identified some key criteria. We wanted the task force members to be a diverse group that represented the residents that lived in the housing community. And we engaged well-respected members of the community to be on a selection, kind of an external selection committee. And that included Ann Heller, City Councilwoman Raylon Leaks-May, thank you, Dr. Joel Milner, and Reggie Sutherland, who's the VP of the commission and also a resident. When they finished their deliberations, and based on that selection criteria, we had a well-rounded core task force of 9 people. Our process also engaged an equity lens to support participation, and this was really key, I think. We recognized that in order to fully participate, people needed access to resources and have support in using those resources. In partnership with the Ferndale Public Schools, we were able to provide 5 Chromebooks, and 5 wireless hotspots to enable those without tech to access the meetings. We also held 2 Zoom trainings that were mainly just fun, so that people could get used to the tools and how to use them, and to help them if they'd never used Zoom before. So those were really key ingredients into, I think, building a successful task force. And then the people themselves, which were amazing, showing up at every meeting, met like 1 or 2 times a month from January to June in 2021, put in a lot of time and energy. A final important component to the process was education and discussion. As I mentioned, the task force met 1 to 2 times a month. During this time, they reviewed data from the surveys and interviews. They engaged in learning sessions about the history of low-income housing and racial inequities from guest speakers. They learned about what it means to apply an anti-racism lens to the work and process. And they had a chance to review innovative approaches from other areas of the country. So all of this was like a multi-layered approach that allowed informed decisions to be made as they were looking at the data. And it helped to make sense of and connect the data to needed policy and procedural changes. As you're going to hear from Heather in a minute, the process yielded really tremendous results, from simple but impactful changes to more complicated changes that required partnerships from other groups. And you all are familiar with some of those because, as Heather mentioned, the advocacy to eliminate source of income discrimination for landlords was something you also advocated for. Some simple changes that they landed on included creating a way for people to pay their rent bills online. So some things seem really, like, I don't know, why did we do that before? It was, some simple things that can be done. Making important forms and documents readily accessible, and taking a fresh look at how work order requests are handled in order to maximize resident comfort and independence. Some of the more complicated changes included installing a staff member at Autumn House, which immediately reduced a previous sense of disconnection. And seeing that and having someone there in the building makes a huge difference for building relationships and for seeing the day-to-day. And also seeing that housing choice voucher participants who are sprinkled across the 3-county area, not necessarily located in Ferndale, so that connection may not be as tight or as close. They were struggling with landlord discrimination and a lack of housing options that were in high opportunity neighborhoods. There's a density of people living in low opportunity neighborhoods. So how can Ferndale support placing people in high-opportunity neighborhoods. This, of course, resulted in a push for advocacy, seeing some changes that are outside the power of the Ferndale Housing Commission, but acknowledging a need to advocate up, such as in the case of eliminating source of income discrimination. Perhaps the most impactful change was the beginnings of a culture shift, learning about restorative practices as an approach to dealing with conflict, training staff on trauma-informed care. The Ferndale Housing Commission also used the IDEA Task Force recommendations as an overlay to their strategic plan, which helped then to clearly outline new priorities for growth and direct important financial resources. So it provides a lens or a filter through which to look at those things. And I know the city is aware of these things as well. I think that perhaps that's a good segue back to Heather to talk more about some of the important changes that are being made. But before I do want to say that the Ferndale Housing Commission is doing what they're doing could be an excellent model for other low-income housing systems here in Michigan and outside of the state. There are really when we were looking around for best practices, we found very few standout models, and we had to draw from other sectors. So there's very few solid examples of how to do this, but Ferndale's on the right path here, and the Ferndale Housing Commission is doing excellent work. So it would be wonderful if the story of what they've done was shared more broadly to provide examples of how to do this work. So big thank you to Heather and all of her leadership.
Well, and thank you for your great work. I will try not to hyperventilate in my mask now. So yes, so the IDEA initiative really, began with that data collection piece, went into the task force review. It yielded 113 recommendations. So we got a nice list, and I love a list. I love a spreadsheet. So we had those organized in kind of general topical areas around legislative advocacy, our program and administrative policies and practices, some board governance issues. We updated our bylaws this year, for example. And the staff and board development and training piece I'm really excited about. We laid out a one-year plan for staff training, and we're endeavoring to do some joint training with residents as well, because we thought if we learn together and begin to grow together around some of these shared concepts and constructs, that'll really be a great way to go. So we're excited about those items. And in terms of implementation, we've done 71 of the 113. Like I said, I love my spreadsheet. I think that comes out to be 60-some%. So we're I figure it's about an 18-month implementation plan, and we're about a third of the way through. So we're on good pace. I do expect to get through all of the recommendations in 2022. A couple of these are tied to when we update some foundational policy manuals, and we'll need to enlist some consulting assistance for that part of it. So we're waiting on a couple things that'll take down the rest of those recommendations. But we've taken quick action on a lot of these, and it's been really exciting and fun to do. And it's been great through our strategic planning process to actually, take the report, flow it through our strategic plan, and then move into our budgeting and get to put money where our hearts and our mouths and our minds are. And so, for example, one of the exciting programs for this year, we have an RFP out right now looking for some assistance for a search facilitator for our housing choice voucher families. How can we get people direct one-on-one help accessing a very tight and difficult rental market with, and then they've got caps on what they can spend. It's just even more challenging. How do we offer these families an opportunity and literally a hand, someone to hold hand and help them? Do you want to go to a different area? How do we find you something there? So we'll be able to fund a search facilitator to work directly with families on that kind of work. And so we're doing, some exciting things this year to implement some of these ideas. We're really excited about our annual report. That was another recommendation. Really to do an annual report through that equity lens. So when we look back on our data, we used to just look back on our data. How many days to turn a work order? That's interesting to me, but for, it's different when you look at it. Is there a difference in how we turn work orders by building? Is there a difference in how we handle complaints by race? So we started really looking at things just a little differently, and it kind of changes our whole approach, and it's really exciting. And staff is embracing it, and we're excited about it, and it's been a great learning opportunity and a way to continuously improve. So we're going to continue to monitor, adjust, and improve over time. And then looking forward, I mentioned a couple of our, big items like the search facilitator and budgeting work. The other thing I'll mention, we're engaged again with the U of M student group, who's fantastic. They're looking at our website through an accessibility kind of focus. How can we make our website more accessible for people? And so I'm excited about their recommendations that'll be coming and improvements to that. I also wanted to thank the Ferndale Community Foundation for another grant that will support our continued computer training and even GED assistance programming. So we're doing a lot of fun stuff in the next year. And then I will open it up for any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions?
Through the chair, thank you for your presentation. I'm really excited about a lot of the things that you guys have going on. I have a question because 2 years ago, there was some program, the name of which I've completely forgotten, that provided sort of as I remember it, this is my characterization, sort of a not ideal process, but a process nonetheless that might have led to some substantial investment in buildings, and either a new building or substantial upgrades in the buildings. What happened with that?
Thank you
really
for
don't
asking
know.
that. Thank you for asking that. Like I said, I'm slightly hyperventilating and I'm worried about the time. That's why I kind of glossed over that part. So thank you for asking that. That was called RAD.
Yes.
And I never want to say RAD again.
Right.
So I keep looking for silver linings through pandemic, right? And one of the silver linings is that quite literally in March, just before the pandemic, we had all of our properties appraised because we were preparing to proceed with significant reinvestment and repositioning of our properties. Well, then COVID struck, and honestly, we couldn't make great progress. We couldn't make any progress. In the meantime, we've had some major shifts, some big changes at HUD, some new funding opportunities, some loosening of regulations. So, through this difficult time, some ingenuity has sprung forth. And so while we've had to wait and it's been frustrating, it's been an opportunity because I think we'll have more tools, and that's why I don't want to say RAD anymore, because I feel like we're going to have more tools in the toolkit, more opportunities to do things. And yes, we are back at it. I just, this month, have started having some meetings again with some folks. We want to prioritize our scattered site homes because we're really challenged to maintain those. As you might imagine, taking care of one house is a handful. We're taking care of 43, plus 2 buildings that are aging, all the deferred maintenance, all the challenges therein. So our hope is that we can begin to address the backlog of maintenance with regard to our scattered site homes, find some solutions there, and then focus our attention on our buildings. But I'll just reiterate that our goals haven't changed. We have 166 public housing units now. We are absolutely committed to maintaining every single one of those, if not adding more. We are not looking to reduce or get out of the business of affordable housing. We're looking to do it better and through a more sustainable means to go forward. So thank you for asking.
I think this presentation is amazing. I'm just amazed at how far the Ferndale Housing Commission has come under your leadership and the board, and the 180 difference in engagement with the residents over the past few years. And I'm really proud of the work that you're doing, that everybody's doing here to make our residents more comfortable and the programs more accessible. Just everything that you're doing has been phenomenal and aligns with what the city's been trying to do with our own equity work as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate the time to update the community, and I welcome any questions. Please, my contact information is there, and visit our website. It'll be even better in the months to come, but our contact information is there too.
Thank you, and it's great to see you again.
And
We also wanted to recognize the task force members. They weren't able to be here in person tonight, but many of them are on our Zoom call. And I think we've got a list there.
oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. We'd like to just call out their names.
Yep.
The really tremendous amount of time and energy went into this. and a huge amount of work.
Yep.
And Heather prepared all of these lovely certificates. You're not here, but you're going to be getting this.
Yes, we will get them to you, but I will just call out Sheila Ghali, Mark Hopkins, Tamika H., Will Johnson, Lee Rudolph, Darlene Shanks, Reggie Sutherland, who is our board vice president as well, Nina Kelly, who represents the Ferndale Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission, and Kathleen Redmond from Affirmations, all participated on the task force. So a huge thank you, and yes, a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to our second presentation of 5B is Ferndale Police Department presentation of updates to the Transparency Dashboard and review of the 2021 statistics.
Well, hello there.
Hello.
Well, let me get the dashboard up. I know I have it sitting here. So I'm very excited to be here today. In case anyone that doesn't know me, I am Sergeant Vanessa Danielson, and I've been tasked with this presentation today and a lot of assistance with building what we have so far in the dashboard. But I am really excited to show you what's progressed since May 10th of 2021 when we first brought this forward. To give you a little background about the dashboard for those that weren't here for that presentation, it was a pilot program that was purchased by Oakland County with Oakland County Commissioner Dave Coulter, which was our previous mayor, which has been a great additive to our Ferndale Police Department and the ability to be transparent to the community. The original dashboard had a board put together to discuss and approve 3 different tabs that you'll see here that they're approved data sets that bring forward a lot of information from police departments. They were calls for service, citations, and arrests were the 3 that were originally approved. And if you remember, we weren't the first police department to come forward with our transparency dashboard because we decided that those 3 were not the right amount of information provided to our community and expected by our community. So when we went forward in May of 2021, we had 9 dashboards that were listed to provide more information to our community. And since our go live in May of 2021, we've added 3 additional dashboards to it, which will be citizen complaints, mental health referrals, which will provide data for our collaboration with Common Ground, as well as crime trends, which I know has really been something that has been brought forward to our police department for strategic planning. So I'm going to go through our dashboards and a little bit of the information that's provided data-wise here. To go over first with our calls for service, you'll see here that it provides data for 3 years here. But if you use your filter, we're able to bring this down to 2021. So for last year, we had 19,915 calls for service. If you look at the previous years, this is about an 8% increase over 2020 and an 18% increase over 2019. So that is a pretty decent increase in 2 years. And these calls for service range from traffic complaints to assaults, building alarms to assisting our local fire departments. When you look through citations, you'll also see some dramatic differences when it comes from year to year. Obviously, we do say that a lot of the decreases can be attributed to the COVID times, less traffic on the roads and things of that sort. But in addition to that, it's also been a change in mindset when it comes to the Ferndale Police Department and how we move forward with traffic violations. You'll see in 2019 there was about 10,000 traffic violations, whereas when you look into 2021, we're just over 2,000 violations. But when I talk about the 2,000 violations, which as you know, it's about 20%. In addition to that, if you look at our next tab, it's going to be warnings, which in 2019 and 2020, we didn't document warnings the same way as we did in 2021, which warnings here are about 1,500 for last year. So if you add that to our violations, it's at the 3,500 mark for 2021, which is how we used to actually document warnings, is in the citations. So 2019's numbers would have included our warnings. If you look further into the data, I'll just show you a little bit. Your traffic warnings, not in this section, but I'm going to go into citations. And if I look into citations, I can actually show you that, prohibited parking and impeding traffic were our two major violations for 2021. And if I was to dig a little bit deeper, I can show you age breakdowns for each of those violations as well. You can look into further down into the race and gender breakdowns for these violations. So you'll have the opportunity to go back and look into the dashboard, and you can actually drill down to each of these numbers and really show what the data is, what data we're providing you. And every one of these tabs actually allows you to drill down into them and show you what different violations actually come through with all the data behind them. All right. If I move forward, we're going to go into response to resistance. Currently, it's showing that we had 25 response to resistance, which last year we defined response to resistance is basically the unilateral term for use of force when it comes to accredited agencies. We say response to resistance because it is our response to some sort of force that's needed. We had 25 incidents documented currently on the dashboard from last year. Now, in that, obviously, we talked about calls for service. We had 19,915 calls for service in 2021. So with 25 incidents of force used, that puts us at about 0.0001% of each of our use of force. So we had 25 uses of force, over 19,000 calls for service. So our police contacts were about 0.0001%. And then in addition to that, we talked about training last year, which I really think is extremely interesting for this dashboard, because it really shows how much time and energy is put in to training law enforcement. Last year in I apologize, there's 2 years here listed now because 2022 has already started. In 2021, we had 4,839 hours that have been logged. When you look at it, we have 40 officers currently for the police department and 8 dispatchers, so 48 people. So that's approximately 100 hours of training that we logged last year for each employee with the Ferndale Police Department. In addition to that, if you look a little bit deeper, there's response to resistance here. As I click that, it defines 1,414 hours of response to resistance training for our employees, which response to resistance training is firearms, like less lethal or taser instruction, as well as de-escalation. So there's a lot of time. That's 30% of our training was dedicated towards de-escalation or less lethal or firearms training, the response to resistance training that we do document a ton of, which I just think is extremely interesting because it really just shows a lot of time that we spend trying to train our officers correctly. Crime mapping, I know that was seen last year. This one's brought to you by Clemis. It's basically everything that Clemis logs that is attached to someone that resides in the city of Ferndale or for the Ferndale Police Department. You can search through this site. You can filter it down to look for exactly what you want. So if it's traffic, or it's not, I wouldn't say traffic crashes particular, but you can search by traffic crashes. You could look at suspicious circumstance. You could look at any person that's been arrested in the city of Ferndale by going through this crime mapping. And it's through the county that they provide this to everyone. It's open to the public through their websites. All right, I'm going to move on to traffic crashes, which I also think is a huge information gathering because it's about the transient population that drives through our town. One of my favorite screens is actually down here with the number of traffic crashes, where it shows you just really where the amount of traffic really is. So, I mean, everyone always says that there's a lot more traffic on main roads than there is on side streets. Well, this actually proves it too. It's showing to you that the number of traffic crashes along Woodward 8 Mile, Hilton 9 Mile are where a lot of our population moves through. You see a lot of vehicles coming down there. But when you look at all of these, you can actually click on one of these vehicles and open it up, and it's going to tell you what date and time this traffic crash occurred at, what the crash ID is. You can see the driver's sex and race on here, and the different vehicles are listed as well by just scrolling through. So you can really dig into this information. These screens above it obviously are information that's pulled from UD10, so the state traffic crash reporting system, and it goes through Clemis and then is provided directly from Clemis into this site by ARCS and or Tyler Tech, depending on how you want to word who they are to us today. but 614 crashes, 1,261 drivers. So obviously, a lot of crashes are, 2-vehicle, 3-vehicle, some of them only single. So that's why the total of drivers may be different than what you would multiply 614 by 2. But it shows, obviously, race, gender breakdowns, and throughout all of this information. The couple of brand new tabs that we've come to are like citizen complaints, crime trends, and mental health referrals. So I'll show you those as well. But citizen complaints, when we discuss those, we investigated 8 citizen complaints last year. So once again, when you look at it, 8 citizen complaints is about 1 complaint per 2,489 police contact. Which is a pretty small number. That's a 0.0004% police contact. Now, that also doesn't include, there may have been multiple contacts in that one call for service. So you may have 8 people listed on a report, but we only count that as 1 police contact in our report writing system. So there's 0.0004% is the greatest number, or I guess I shouldn't say it that way, but it's the smallest number. It's a very small number comparatively to the number of police contacts that we had last year. And we investigate every complaint. I know that we've said this probably 1,000 different times when we talk about citizen complaints, but because of accreditation, we investigate firsthand, secondhand, anonymous, thirdhand complaints in every fashion fully, and then they're documented and placed onto this transparency dashboard. And all of the information is included here: race, gender breakdowns, how we took the call from phones, emails, if it was anonymously dropped off, if it came through the city's website. All of that is documented here for you, and you're able to scroll through and look through the complaints, including the dispositions. And then next up, we're going to talk about crime trends. Crime trends is a little bit different. It's a lot of information. It is just out here. We just got this up about 2 weeks ago, and we are still working through some of the bugs and maybe some of the data to try and make it easier to read. Right now, what this is showing is the percentage of crime increase from 2021 to the previous 5 years of data. So from the 7.8% increase from last year, and then 18% from the year prior to, all the way back into 2016, which is 66.4% increased from 2016 to the 2021 data. Now, once again, we've changed the way that we police and the way that we document things. So that increase, while it seems extremely dramatic, could be because of the way that we've changed how we show the public everything that we do, documenting traffic stops that maybe previously we didn't always document every single one, documenting our contacts at the park or our businesses. We document everything that we possibly can now because we want to be transparent about every activity that we do. So I say that is probably the biggest increase from 2016 to 2021 that I notice, is just our change in the way that we share information and the way that we document information.
If I could, you're going to see this level off over the next few years. We have put an emphasis on documentation and records. You could arguably use 2021 as a baseline going forward, and then you should see it plateau off, and we'll get a better idea of true increase, just because there's such an emphasis on documentation now.
In addition to that, we're still building the crime trends dashboard. We really are looking at adjusting all of this data into maybe some different categories. So it's not defined by, if you look down here, 60 categories, but maybe something slightly different. Maybe more of a violent crime section versus a miscellaneous complaint section. So that way we can show the true changes and a lot of the crime components that maybe are more concerning to the public. So that way it kind of concentrates it a little bit more so you don't have to search through it to try and find it. But it is something that we're trying to build. This is the first of its kind when it came to ARCS, as well as Tyler Tech, the first time that they've ever built a crime trends dashboard. And we really are working hand in hand to try and make sure that we provide the right data that's easily readable to the public. Then we're going to move forward to our one of our last dashboards, but mental health referrals. So mental health referrals really talks about the partnership that we have with Common Ground. And we started this partnership in July of last year, and we've really moved forward from there on how we record and document our referrals. We wanted to be able to really see the data and be able to monitor ourselves as to how we're really using Common Ground and our own policies on how we respond to mental health, and being able to document that for the public to really show them just a lot of information concerning mental health, because it is such a large topic right now throughout every community, because we all have some sort of, we have a stake in the game. You know, everybody's watching this. This is something that's extremely important to everyone, and we want to be able to make sure that we're using this service properly. And I think documenting it and sharing it with the public is extremely important. Now, one of the things that I do show here is in 2021, we had 14 referrals once this system went up. And we were able to look through these referrals, and we find that 8 of them were based off of outside services calling in, either a family member or maybe a neighbor. It could have been the passerby at a store that needed a welfare check done on an individual just to provide them with services. And not necessarily did they need services that day, emergency services, meaning a commitment to the hospital or something of that sort, but they may have needed some additional assistance after the fact, and Common Ground is able to provide them with that. So by filling out this referral, we're able to get them the in-need services that they need, whatever services that could be. It could be just someone to speak to or a place to stay, but Common Ground has been willing and able to help us get them there. We've also added our response to mental health to our policies, which is our last dashboard here. It's down here at the end. I did click on it today. It doesn't appear to be working. It has a password stuck on it, so I don't want to click on it and try and open it. I have reached out to ARCS, and hopefully we'll have that fixed by tomorrow. But that's definitely something that we want to be able to provide, is just the amount of the policy that it covers every aspect of an officer responding to a mental health call for service. Now, we said last year that where we started on May 10th of 2021 was just a starting point. It was really our first go-around, our first draft of where we want this transparency dashboard to go. Now, we've made some headway when it comes to how we document and all the report writing systems that we have that are ingrained in this system. We have added a few dashboards. We know that we're still building. We were building in May of 2021, and we are still building in February of 2022. This is going to be an ongoing process. It's going to have a lot of changes from the actual dashboards that are inside the system to what it provides us for annual reports and things of that sort, to additional changes based on the community's need. So at this point, this is where we're at when it comes to our dashboard, and our new Tyler Tech is the new company that runs this programming system. We've had a great working relationship with them over the last year, and I'm hoping to continue that. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or obviously the chief as well.
Open it up. I will open it up to council for questions.
Questions only or comments as well?
Comments as well.
Through the chair. Number one, again, thank you for the time and attention that you've put into this. I've learned in looking at some of the dashboards and data's available, or data portals available in other cities, that, you know, ours does have quite a bit more information than some of the others. But I do have a couple of suggestions for potential future categories. One question that we get a lot are officer demographics, you know, in terms of race, gender, zip code where they reside, and zip code for many of these categories too, citations, warnings, arrests, would help to kind of provide some context as to, you know, where some folks are coming from who do pass through our community and have contacts with the police. Policies related to people with disabilities, you know, how to provide ASL interpreters or any other accommodations that are contemplated in our policies. Another category, and I know this is a little bit more challenging, but I have heard of other data sources doing this where use of force, internal investigations, citizen complaints can be tracked by officer. Now, I understand that when in public disclosure, it wouldn't identify an officer by name, but in some places, they'll assign a randomized number so that if trends, for example, when we saw that there were 8 citizen complaints, if 6 of them were against officer, 102 or whatever, then it would, raise a red flag that, something might be going on there. So I appreciate that you've said this is the beginning, we can always add to it. These are some of the categories that I'm interested in seeing in the future.
Can I comment to that, actually?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay. So while our dashboard doesn't provide that information, we do have an early warning system through Guardian Tracker, which is not something that's attached to our transparency dashboard, but it is something that's regularly reviewed. It is something that our annual report covers. It is something that is looked at in every incident. Every use of force, it is documented. When there is a number, or more than one, I should say, incident of a use of force that involves the same officer, it is heavily reviewed. After the 3rd incident, it adds a secondary review to it. So there is numerous of these types of reviews done when it comes to the use of force. It's just not provided on the dashboard as to that officer.
Yeah, and thank you for that context. I should have known better than to make it seem like nothing like that happens internally. But it would be nice to have the public transparency component to that, in an anonymous way.
So our annual review also is published. We do provide that. Our annual report will be in at I believe mid-year is about when it comes out. We do have annual reviews done on internal investigations, citizen complaints, our use of force. All of those are done, which documents every aspect of that and is provided, just so that you're aware.
Thank you.
Through the chair. One thing that I noticed about the dashboards, if you, just for example, if you go to arrests, the tab for arrests, and you scroll down to the chart that breaks out the misdemeanor, warranty, arrests, assault battery, when you hover over any of the bars, it gives some detailed information. But when I hover over the title, I don't really know what some of these things mean. So for example, DWLS, I think I know what it means, but I'm not sure. Is there maybe an opportunity to provide more descriptions to these titles and maybe on some of the other pages as well?
It is definitely something that we can add to this to make it easier to read. That's for certain. Most of these titles are dictated by the reports that are coming through from Clemis, but we can definitely add some descriptions to them.
It'd be great. Thank you.
Can you remind me what other cities are involved in this pilot? I can't remember. Was it Southfield?
The pilot program included Southfield, I believe it was Novi, Oakland County Sheriff's Office, and Southfield Lathrop.
And how long is the pilot for? When do they plan on, I'm assuming they're going to plan on expanding to other cities.
It has already started. Some of the agencies have started to pick up the transparency dashboard as well. It is spreading throughout the county. I don't know, some agencies are not actually using the county's program. They've decided against it. But if you do look through even those 5 pilot agencies, the only one that has taken anything more than the 3 dashboards that we started with was Novi, and they're at 8 now. So they're still working their way up, but are a little bit behind us. We've received calls from multiple agencies as to why we decided to move forward with more dashboards, and we've discussed it, and some of them are going to come forward with more than just the initial 3 as well. So the pilot program, I believe, lasts 2 years while the county actually covers the cost, and then after that it does revert to the cities.
Okay, so we have about another year before council will take a look at paying for the dashboard ourselves.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Through the chair, do we happen to know what the cost is toward Ferndale at this time?
Well, what I can tell you is this, as I don't know the original cost of the program that the county has covered, but they do cover the first 3 and then the following 3 dashboards that are on there. And then after that becomes a creative cost that comes towards the city. We haven't received a quote on that cost yet. We are waiting for that, but it is something that's in the works so that we know when we move forward from 2023 what that cost would be to us.
Okay, so we get base for free. Any add-ons are our own. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I really appreciate the update on the dashboard and your progress. I think it's really great that you guys are diving in deeper and going beyond what was expected from the dashboard, number of dashboards. And I know that you guys are really leveraged by the other cities based off of my conversations with you. So I really appreciate our Ferndale Police Department taking the lead, as well as you taking the lead here.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and to us, it is definitely something that was needed, and we appreciate Oakland County for giving us the opportunity to move forward with it.
All right, well, thank you so much. All right, that concludes our presentation of 5B, and now I'm going to go on to call the audience. And we set aside about 30 minutes to do call the audience, and if we need to go beyond that, we add it on at the end of our regular agenda. And we take call to audience comments from the chamber and via Zoom. And I usually start with folks in the chamber room and invite you to say anything on or off, comments on or off the agenda, and invite you to have your comments for about 3 minutes. Also wanted to say that we have our Discourse with Dignity guidelines. Abusive language, threats, bullying, and personal attacks are discouraged. It's hard to get to the root of an issue if the content is buried within disruptive or harmful behavior. And for productive conversation, comments should address issues and not people. And please address the city council and the mayor rather than staff, because staff take policy direction from the city council. So with that, I'm going to open up the comments in the chambers, and our first runner-up tonight is Sharon Chess. Welcome to the dais.
Thank you, and good
For the
evening
podium,
to all
yeah.
of you. I haven't seen anybody, I don't think, since Christmas, so, and it's still hard to identify behind masks. The purpose of my coming today is an update on the Ferndale Community Concert Band, of course. We had an upcoming concert scheduled for February, which, because of COVID, we were unable to get back to rehearsals in a timely manner and only started last week. So we've canceled our February concert. That means that our next concert is on April 24th, Sunday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm excited about this concert because we're doing something very special. One of the pieces of music that have been chosen is called American Elegy. This piece of music was originally written to honor those students in that community where the Columbine shooting had occurred. Because of the Oxford tragedy, we're going to dedicate this piece of music to Oxford Strong, to the community of Oxford and those students. And so we rehearsed this last Tuesday, and it was our first rehearsal, and of course it wasn't as good as what it will be for that performance, but knowing the emotion and the content and the purpose of this piece of music, we were all in tears. So it's a very emotional piece of music. And the rest of the music that we're playing for that concert is also our band is wonderful, and so it's just an opportunity to come and sit and enjoy the sounds of your community concert band. Our next performance will be on June 19th. This is an exciting opportunity because we're celebrating Juneteenth. It lands on June 19th. We're going to cross-promote with the Jubilee, the Juneteenth Jubilee people, with what they've got going on Livernois. Their event will be on Friday and Saturday, our event on Sunday. So we're going to do that. How we're celebrating that and recognizing that is the music that we choose will be done by African American composers. And it's also our annual Father's Day celebration and recognition of all those dads. And as usual, we always have the bake sale, the musician bake sale. So I look forward to having all of you guys at our concerts. We're also working on an event here in the city. We're having our 4th meeting about it, but we're going to see if we can arrange some busking going on. And if you don't know what busking is, because I didn't, you have to be a musician, I guess, to get that. It means we're going to have a bunch of our musicians who are independent musicians as well as members of our FCCB. On June 21st, summer solstice, they'll be playing around the city. So we're currently working with Tim Perry, Tim Kay, and Jesse Bates on this event. So we'll keep you updated on that. But summer solstice, you're going to see music all around the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. All right, is there anybody else in the chamber who would like to make a public comment? No hand raisers? Okay, we're going to move on to Zoom. And Denitzia is going to manage everybody who is calling in and or Zooming.
So there's currently no hand raisers, but if you'd like to leave a public comment and you're on Zoom right now, you can raise your hand now.
We'd love to talk to you. Caller number 4. All right, seeing none raising their hand on Zoom, I'm going to close call to audience, and now we are going to move to the consent agenda. And I'm going to read that, and council may make a decision on what they would like to do with the consent agenda. All right, 8A, approval of minutes for the January 24th, 2022 regular city council meeting and January 31st, 2022 special city council meeting. 8B, approval of the purchase of the Trimble R2 GIS marking device for facilities from Sealer Instrument and Manufacturing Company in the amount of $7,050.23. 8C, approval of payment to the VersaLift Midwest for emergency repairs on Salt Truck 1246 for dump cylinder repair in the amount of $6,241.51. 8D, approval of the renewal of the Transportation Improvement Association membership in the amount of $6,835.50. 8E, approval of the Personal Patrol Rifle Purchase Program in the amount of $14,858.82, repaid by the officers in full within 1 year. 8F, consideration of facilitation services to support the Citizen Facilities Task Force. 8G, consideration of the fiscal year 2022 mid-year budget adjustment. And 8H, approval of bills and payrolls as submitted by the City Manager's Office and subject to review by the City Council Finance Committee. What is the pleasure of council?
Mayor, I move that we accept the consent agenda items as presented.
Moved by Councilwoman Leaks May and supported by Councilwoman Mikulski. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem James?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes, and the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Moving on to the regular agenda. It is 9A is the 2022 Citizen-Led Task Force on Facility Appointments. And who is introducing that tonight?
Through the chair, I'll introduce that. One moment. Okay. On December 2nd, City Council held a special session and received the results of a facilities condition assessment that they had approved from our outside contractor. Our facilities manager, James Janison, and I presented a summary of the results, and the results concluded that the city has substantial capital investments in the facilities that were studied. And so City Council agreed unanimously to move forward with appointing a citizen-led task force on facilities. The shape of that task force was adopted by council through resolution during their first meeting in January 2022. And since then, staff opened up a public application process and promoted it robustly through cross communications, city communications. It was about a 4-week application process. We received 29 applications. Those applications were forwarded to the mayor for review and interviewing and appointments. The mayor has selected 9 members for city council's consideration this evening. Those names are identified in the packet, and the motion does refer to those names as a packet, as just one simplified motion. And I will do my best to read those names and hopefully not butcher any last names, and I apologize in advance if I do so. The 9 applicants for discussion and consideration by council tonight: Carla Pareja, Chris Best, Dale, I apologize, I really should know by now, Dale Villarolo.
That's it. He texted me the actual pronunciation, and I think you did it right.
How'd I do? All right.
Thanks, Dale.
David Strakas, Donnie Johnson, Lynn Clark Geiner, Quinn Ziegler, Rachel Downs, and Thomas Newman. Their applications and credentials are attached. Ms. Quinn Ziegler did leave me a voicemail correcting the packet information. She actually serves as a commissioner on the Environmental Sustainability Commission. I believe that commission is noted incorrectly in the packet. So just a point of correction. This evening, these 9 nominations are considered by council. Council can discuss the nominations and approve the mayor appointments through the motion. And I'm available for any additional questions.
I would like to provide some context too. I really appreciate council's guidance and input on the final selection. I just wanted to give out some numbers. There's been a little change with a couple of the folks. So I just wanted to say that there were 29 applicants. We had 52% female and 48% male apply. Out of, I think that's down to 17. Out of the 29, 17 applied, had never volunteered with the city before, and I think that is a wonderful show for people wanting to get involved with their community. And then 9 people have volunteered before. And in the packet, it says Donnie Johnson doesn't have anything, but Donnie is serving on the Ferndale Housing Commission. So, so that needs to be corrected, and that is my error in my own Excel spreadsheet. Believe it or not, we had like 6 architects apply, and so really grateful for that type of background. And the real decision, and it was really difficult to come down to the decision, was having a balance of gender, age. Council members expressed the need to have residents who had children. Only 3 people that I could identify and had children, and that was talking to council members about who they knew and who they didn't, and whether or not they had children, so that I had that data point in there. And then also sort of a range of years in Ferndale. And I was also interested in making sure that the task force, the final task force, had really quite a few voices that maybe hadn't been working with the city before. And so we are balanced there. I think we have 5 who've never worked with the city before and have never volunteered. And then some people who are familiar with some aspect of the city, working with in some capacity. And it was also important for me to have a member of the Master Land Use Plan representative. And Lynn Clark Geiner has signed up for continuation of volunteering on this task force and being a representative. So that is sort of the thought process that went into it. And I have been following up with everybody who applied, and in the process of, I haven't gotten through everybody yet, but trying to let everybody know that there are other ways to volunteer for the city and encouraging them to apply for boards and commissions and other capacities. and inviting them to be part of the draft of the facilities plan and making sure that they're giving feedback and comments on that time when the opportunity comes. So making sure that they know that they still can be involved in this process down the road. So that is sort of, oh, and then finally, making sure that every sort of experiments alignment was addressed, because every council expressed balance. So, you know, I can't put 5 architects on there. So really tried to make sure that we had a balance. And it was a hard choice, because great experience had applied and interest with the city. And we also have 2 business owners as well, and 2 folks with kids.
Well, and through the mayor, just to clarify, you mentioned that you have 2 business owners, but they are also residents, so everybody on here
Yes.
are residents.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And it was also important to have, I think, a representative from the Kulik Center Task Force, who had already gone through that process with the city and fully understood the needs of that building. Since that's a priority area for the council to address.
Well, through the mayor, to the mayor, thank you very much. I can only imagine how difficult it was having to go through so many applications and you know, selecting people with such, you know, broad requirements. You had a very tough task, and I think you did a great job. There's a number of people that I'm not familiar with, and I'm, you know, looking forward to knowing more about them as they get involved in the committee and the task force. And there are a few people that I'm very familiar with, and I think are going to be a great addition to the conversation.
And I'd also like to point out, there are 5 people on this task force that I have no personal relationship with. Some of them I know of, but I don't actually interface with on a regular basis. And so that was important to me too, is getting new faces on this task force.
I may through the chair, I'm just pleased as to how many people signed up for this task force. Did you say 27?
29.
29 people? And I know of quite a few people on this list as well, but there are some people that I don't know. So I'm really excited to see what this group of talented individuals comes up with to help us with their facility assessments.
I just appreciate all of you giving me feedback and perspectives in this process. I really tried to be inclusive in all of your needs and everything.
Through the chair, so our objective tonight is to approve the appointments to the task force. But I think there's probably a lot of questions that people have moving forward after these are appointed. These individuals are appointed. When will this task force first convene? You know, do we have a date set and a time?
That is a common question from all the people I talk to.
Yeah.
So they all want to know.
Where would these meetings take place? I'm going to kind of assume it's probably going to be here at City Hall. Is there going to be one? We discuss this after a motion is made?
Yep.
Then I will make the motion to confirm the appointments for the 2022 Task Force on Facilities members as submitted by the city manager, selected by the mayor.
Second. Moved by Polika and seconded by James. And we have a motion on the floor, and now open it up for
Okay, so to
commenting
continue on with my questions. I'm assuming that the general public will be welcomed to attend each of these meetings if they wanted to. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there, I know that a number of city employees are going to be participating, but is there one city employee that is going to be the point of contact for this task force? And who would that be? And there's one other question.
Council liaison?
Oh, there's two questions. I'm assuming that the first meeting would be selected by the city, but then the committee will decide what would be the best date, time, schedule for their meetings to best fit their schedules. I kind of want to throw that as a question, but also as a statement. And then, yes, the idea of a council liaison. And since I have the floor for a moment, I would like to throw my hat in the ring for that position.
Yes, we decided at our November meeting and our December meeting that we would wait to this meeting to select the city council liaison. So the time is now. So what, Joe, do you want to answer some of those questions?
Yeah, through the chair, a lot of those answers are TBD. So I don't want to leave you in a lurk, but the most important perspective is from the volunteers themselves. We're asking a significant investment in time, and we're trying to negotiate 9 competing schedules. So following the approval, should the nominations be approved, my internal team that I've listed in the memo to council is preparing an onboarding packet and a welcome packet for those 9 individuals. And through those 9 applications, 4 people expressed interest in a chair or vice chair position. So the first thing I'd like to do is contact those 4 people and discuss their interest and discuss the process for appointment of a chair and vice chair role. And then from that, I'd like to engage the 9 in an exploratory, really brief meeting just for introductions this month and set the table for scheduling out our 2 monthly meetings between the time period, which is March through August. So I'd like to pre-schedule those as best as possible. And we'll choose time, place, and manner from that point. But I don't want to be presumptuous in my assumptions without getting the input from the 9 individuals first. Through the chair, I'd also add, should council approve the nominations, I do want to maybe make space to identify and acknowledge if anyone is in the House who would like to express any comments and or on Zoom. I think we have 3 on Zoom that we've identified, and I think Mr. Newman may be in the House.
Hi. We'll start with folks in the chamber. Hi, Tom. Do you want to come up to the podium and to the microphone and introduce yourself? And thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure. I just think it's a great opportunity to kind of spread a little bit of the workload that needs to be done, and especially I've been in the community for about 15 years, and I live near the Kulik Center. That's really what made me so interested in, being involved in this process. And I just want to thank you guys for, reaching out and kind of spreading that wealth. There's a lot of knowledge in the community, and I hope to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so folks know, he has a construction management background.
He's also a very great precinct inspector, co-captain that we work together quite often with.
Yes.
So I appreciate all of your work, Tom.
And who is joining us via Zoom tonight? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Your microphone's not on.
Hello?
Lynn Clark, who's
Hi, Lynn. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very honored and flattered to have been chosen. I'm overwhelmed that 29 people applied and I was chosen, and it kind of solidifies my work that I did on the steering committee, because I did a ton of research for that, and I'm excited to take all of that research and information and try to help with this task force. And thank you very much for the appointment.
You're welcome. You may learn more about HVAC than you ever knew that you wanted to know.
I'm excited.
All right, and who's next?
Dale, would you like to speak?
Hi, Dale V.
Hello, how are you? Nice job with my last name, Joe. Perfect. That was stellar. I'm glad I can play it back. Mayor, thank you for appointing me to this task force. I'm eager to get started with this. I think it's a very good idea for us to have a citizens committee to take and review the many buildings that we have to maintain here. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's nice that I was on the Kulik Center Task Force a few years ago as well. So I think it's going to be a really good thing, and I'm excited for it and can't wait to start.
Thank you. Thanks for joining tonight.
And then we have one more. Quinn, would you like to speak?
Hi, Quinn. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I am also very honored to serve on this committee. I've very much enjoyed being a part of the Environmental Sustainability Commission as well as the Master Land Use Plan. So very interested in just keeping the good work going and really contributing to the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, there is a motion on the floor. Are there any other comments or questions from council before I proceed with the vote?
I do have a comment.
Sure.
I do hope that whereas we see a wide variety of experiences here, that I hope at some point, somewhere along the line, that the Accessibility Inclusion Commission will be involved in this somehow. I mean, I'm looking at the experience and I can't tell what's what or how it breaks down into accessibility and inclusion. I figure that it's in a lot of these, if not all of these, but I just really want it to be something that's really considered as we move forward.
If I recall, there is quite a bit of content and write-ups in the facilities report about the inaccessibility of our buildings and or challenges. And so I have no doubt that those issues are going to surface during this task force on how do we solve them as part of looking at our buildings going forward. So I think that's going to be a priority. We talked extensively at our December meeting, or one of our January meetings, about the City Hall lift. So that those are all going to be issues building by building that will surface. So I think your concerns and interests are going to be fully addressed by the task force.
Through the chair, staff, the onboarding materials the staff is preparing, we will be providing, of course, the big data sets, the 200-page FCA report, which breaks it down by the multiple facilities. But I've also asked them as best they can to summarize the general issues for each in one-page headlines, briefings. It's going to include total 5-year estimates, lifetime estimates, and then material accessibility, sustainability opportunities for each facility. So you can have kind of a brief snapshot overview of each facility, and then you can dig deeper if you're so inclined. And we'll be scheduling facility tours as well. The one other question I didn't answer, Councilman, I will be the point of contact. There's generally 3 internal roles. There's the administrator role for the group, and that is me, so I am your point of contact. There's going to be a facilitator role as well, and then there's staff supportive role. And all staff who are designated on the team will be asked to participate in each meeting.
If I may, through the chair, Councilman Polaka did raise his hand to be the community council liaison, and I just want you to know that based on our conversations, I fully support him.
Okay. Excellent. I don't think we had other hand raisers for task force. Councilwoman James and Mikulski got their hands full with our Ordinance Committee this year. With that, we have a motion on the floor, and do we need to amend it to include the City Council liaison appointment?
Your Honor, that's up to you whether you wish to amend it or have that as the next item of business as a separate motion.
Let's do this task force separately, so we don't have to amend the motion and just do a straight up new motion for cleanliness. Okay. The motion's on the floor. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Leaks-May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polaka?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem James?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. Thank you so much, City Council, for your confidence and support. Now,
That would be an appropriate time for Councilwoman Leaks-May's.
I move to, appoint?
Appoint.
Nominate Councilman Polaka as the council liaison to the citizen-led task force on facility assessment.
Second.
Moved by Leaks James and seconded by, did I just say Leaks? It's been a long day, people. Moved by Leaks May and seconded by James. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Yes.
Councilmember Polika.
Yes.
Madam James.
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May.
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Okay, yes. Okay, let's go. All right,
Thank you
next.
for your support.
All right, next up is 9B, approval of cured-in-place pipe sewer rehabilitation contract extension with Institute Form Technologies. Let's talk pipes.
Good evening tonight, Mayor and Council. How's everyone doing?
Great.
I know this is the item everyone is here for this evening. Let me pull this up.
It keeps, the pipes of the sewers keep us all in modern living situations, so we appreciate it.
Absolutely. So what we have here tonight is a contract extension with In Situ Form Technologies to continue on our sewer lining that we've been doing over the past couple of fiscal years. Now, what we've been doing as a kind of a reminder for year to year is in 2019, we did an assessment on roughly 21 miles of our sewer main. And with that assessment, we take a look at what sewers need, point repairs right away, where we have the opportunity to do some lining, in addition to where we don't need to do any repairs. So out of that round of assessments, we came up with approximately 7 miles of sewer main that needed to have some lining completed in some way, shape, or form. So with that, we put out a contract for a 1-year contract for sewer lining that had 2 optional 1-year extensions. So this would be the final 1-year extension, if council does approve, to continue on doing this round of sewer lining with In Situ Form. So to date, In Situ Form's lined approximately 4.5 miles of sewer main for us, and this portion of the project would not start until fiscal year 23, but would line approximately 2 miles of sewer system for us. Now, I know the map is a little bit difficult to see because we do have the map is of Ferndale as a whole, but we have had quite a bit of success. In Situ Form's performed satisfactory work, and we've been able to pretty much stay on schedule with the lining that we've done. So this is just, another snapshot of where we've been over the last couple years with our lining. Now, the one thing to keep in mind with this contract is when we initially bid out the contract in fiscal year 2020, it had the 3 contract years. So In Situ Form overall was the low bid if you totaled out over the term of the 3 contract years for the work completed in fiscal year 2020, 21, and 2022. You will see it on the bid tabulation that for this segment of work that In Situ Form was the second lowest bid. The low bidder for the project was at $515,000. In Situ Form came in at $521,000 for this portion of the work. But because we have had good work completed by In Situ Form, and we've been able to establish that rapport over the last few years, our recommendation would be to extend the contract out for an additional year with In Situ Form. Once we're completed with this round of work, which again will not start until fiscal year 2023 rolls around, likely start the work August, September of 2022. At that time, we'll be wrapping up with all of our sewer lining for this round of lining, and then that'll just kind of roll into another large assessment of our overall sewer system, and then that'll help plan out our repairs, lining, and other preventative maintenance measures from, I think we're looking at 2024 and beyond in fiscal years. So This is what we have before us tonight. Is there any questions of council?
I had one. It says that you had 500, oh my God, I'm losing my ability to count, $550,000 budgeted, but it's, the contract extension is 21, oh my God, I am losing it. I thought it was over the 550, don't.
We are under
my own
budget
shark.
in terms of what we did budgeted, and that is reflected in our mid-year budget adjustment as well.
Okay. I guess I just had a comment. I mean, the difference between the lowest and the second lowest bid that you're recommending is only $5,330 approximately.
Yeah, approximately.
And so, you know, you could probably spend that just getting the new firm up to speed and building those relationships. That's
Likely,
one way I look at it.
In terms of the overall contract value of this project, it's about 1%.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Are there additional questions of council on this contract? I haven't received any negative complaints from residents about this company, and so I think that's great.
Through the chair, I'm actually genuinely trying to remember. I think I have heard a recent complaint insofar as there wasn't quite enough notice before a recent implementation action. I don't know what word I'm trying to think of here. If I'm remembering correctly, I think maybe just about a month or two ago, I did see some chatter just about not quite having enough notice for their water being shut off. And so I guess I just would ask that my recollection of when this happened in my neighborhood, things went reasonably well, if I remember correctly. So I would hope that whatever may have lapsed recently can be corrected, and that moving forward, if we decide to extend this contract, we ask for some assurance that there be adequate notice so that people can make other arrangements if necessary. Just so many folks work at home now and just need to know how to plan their day if they're not going to have their water.
Absolutely.
All right, any questions? If not, we need a motion to proceed.
I'll move to approve the cured in place pipe sewer rehabilitation contract extension with In Situ Form Technologies USA LLC in the estimated amount of $521,036.10. The expense charged to water sewer fund capital outlay account number 592000977, and approve the DPW director to sign the contract documents following approval by the city attorney.
Support.
Oh, that was in unison. Moved by James, and I'm going with Mikulski for second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem James?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. And that concludes 9B. On to 9C is the Community Police Advisory Board update. And introducing that tonight is our Assistant to the City Manager, Denise. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Right. So tonight I'll just be updating you on our Community Police Advisory Board and what that looks like, as well as recommendations going forward. So we'll be going over an overview, just looking at questions that we wanted to answer. And then we'll be looking at current accountability structures that are place, research findings, and then we'll go over next steps. So overview is just talking about the council resolution that was passed on October 11th asking, should any existing board or commission undertake a community advisory function, or should a new board be created? And so we were seeking to answer these questions by first looking at organizational accountability structures. I'm sorry, this is a... Let me make sure this is the correct PowerPoint. My apologies.
The folks watching, we're going through some technical difficulties at the moment.
Through the chair, as Denicia is presenting at the lectern, our Assistant City Manager, Kyle Follett, will be monitoring and managing our Zoom access remotely.
Okay, thank you. You want to give a, I don't know, I don't remember if it's in the presentation. Do you want to get a brief overview of where we're at, or is that part of the presentation?
Yeah, that is part of the presentation.
Okay.
Apologies, this presentation has gone through multiple phases, and so the final phase just did not get put up.
Gotta have them for backups.
All right, here we go. So sorry about that. So in order to answer the questions within the overview, we wanted to take a look at the current accountability structures that we have in place now.
One moment, Denise, can you change the view? There you go.
Yep. So first we looked at accountability for civic performance. And so before the 2010 charter amendment that shifted oversight of police and fire to the city manager, both the police and the fire chief reported directly to city council. And the change in the structure allowed for a more unified government where each department reports to the city manager, who then reports to city council. And that's what this looks like.
And I just want to remind people that went out to citywide vote to change the charter amendment, to change the structure, so that everybody was reporting under the city manager, which is how city manager form of government's run. Ferndale was an anomaly and a split structure since its inception, and it caused some challenges in decision making.
So after the accountability for civic performance, we took a look at police accountability structures, and then I'll hand that over to our chief to be the subject matter expert on that. Just a warning, it may be difficult to read some of the flow charts just because the writing is small, but we will be adapting it for the website. And then the full policies are also on the transparency dashboard.
So we're going to start with the citizen complaint process. And like Janessa Danielson covered, they can come in through several different avenues, from anonymous to developed or observed by a supervisor to any number of ways. And we take these very seriously. We investigate them all completely and we report any serious violations of policy that may end up in discipline which may be anywhere from suspension to termination, would pass through the chain of command all the way to the city manager's office, and obviously encompass the human resources director as well.
Before you, I have a question, if you could answer before we dive into the accountability, each one. Can you talk a little bit about why we're showing the accountability structures? I think that was an important part of this process, was to, show, do you want to?
I'll take that.
You'll take that?
Yeah, through the chair. The reason we're providing that overview is because it's not commonly understood that at one point, the reporting mechanism for the police chief and fire chief were actually outside of the city manager's jurisdiction. And so the city council of 2010 then had wanted to shift that so it would unify accountability structures to provide more direct accountability of the police department by virtue of the relationship between the appointment of the city council to the city manager. And so that's number one. And number two, within that change, you have various internal policies that the police department does administer. There's a reporting relationship between the police chief and the city manager and the city council. And there's policies and structures within place, but that is not commonly understood because that is largely mechanically internal, if that makes sense.
Okay, so we're walking through each one to show how
what exists
exists today.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sorry we didn't clarify that prior. We kind of wanted to see where we are now so we can see where we need to go, see where the gaps in the process exist, and give us an idea of what we want in the future. So back to citizen complaints. Citizen complaints are accepted. They're assigned to an investigator. Sometimes it's professional standards. Sometimes it's the detective lieutenant. Sometimes if the complaint involves a supervisor, it will be done. This investigation will be done by the captain himself. They report their findings to the chief of police, and then we'll determine whether or not there's a violation of policy or not, and how severe that violation of policy may be. Some policies are considered maybe minor if it's just a procedural issue, and then they can go all the way up to possibly criminal misconduct. And obviously in those cases, it may result in termination or suspension. In serious policy violations, like I said, the city manager's office would be involved in those decisions. If there is a policy violation, it would then enter into the internal investigation process, which is a little different process. But in the citizen complaint process, policy says that we will report back to that reporting party if we know who it is, give them an explanation of what the investigation entailed. They will get a report of the findings, and those findings they would get a explanation of what the results of the investigation, whether the officer was exonerated, whether it was sustained, not sustained, or perhaps unfounded. But there's open communication with the complainant, and they were provided an explanation. Even if they don't agree with it, they were provided an explanation on how we got that result. The internal investigation process, sometimes it stems from a supervisor witnessing something. Sometimes it stems from, just like we covered, the citizen complaint process. The citizen complaint process is more of a preliminary investigation. The internal investigation process would entail the employees' due process and their labor. It would involve their labor unions. There's due process involved with city or municipal government employees that we have to adhere to. Once the investigation is completed, the findings again are delivered to the chief of police. In this disciplinary process, again, the human resource director and the city manager will be consulted, and then a decision would be made as to what is a fair, disciplinary rendering. The response to resistance process is a bit more complicated. There's several layers of oversight involved in this process. It starts with the officer who uses any type of force to restrain, whether it's a patient, it could be someone who's arrested. That would trigger, at the minimum level, it would be a non-compliant handcuffing, which means all you have to do is pull away from me. And if I have to force you into a set of handcuffs, that triggers a full use of force review or response to resistance review. The officer completes a form. It's forwarded to the next supervisor or their immediate supervisor who interviews all the officers that were there. They also interview the subject of the use of force, and if there's injuries, they're photographed. We look at video evidence. It's a full investigation, a very meaningful review of the entire contact. It means even if it was within policy, if they could have made better decisions, that's evaluated and it's reported back to that officer that you were within policy, but we could have used different tactics. It could have been done safer or better. But it's an exhaustive review. That's just the first level. The next level is the use of force officer, which is usually a command officer. In this case, right currently, it's now Sergeant Blanchard. He is one of the experts in use of force or response to resistance on the department. He is responsible for much of the training that the officers receive. It is also reviewed by the captain, who reviews it through the lens of policy and training to see that that contact and that force was appropriate. After that level, it's either deemed within policy or in training or not within policy and training. And if it is completely excessive, then it would trigger a internal investigation. If it's a minor policy violation, at that time, it could be training. Someone could receive like a remedial training. They could receive a counseling, or it could be referred to the internal investigation process for disciplinary results. So either way, all these results are forwarded to the chief of police, and these are all documented in our Guardian Tracking personnel tracker. If it is a criminal investigation, we do not do our own criminal investigation. We farm all of our criminal investigations to the Oakland County Sheriff's Department for objectivity. It's important that we remain objective. We will do a parallel administrative investigation, but we will not do the criminal investigation. In that case, it'll be investigated by the Sheriff's Department and then forwarded to the Oakland County Prosecutor for review. And this is common practice in law enforcement. In large agencies, they may do their own criminal investigation, but it is inherently hard to stay objective. When it's such a small agency, we want to ensure accountability, and it's important that we hold ourselves accountable and we stay objective during these investigations.
Through the chair, I would also just add again for additional context. Going back to 2010, the city did not have a human resources department. In this case, we've been building it since 2015, so we have established one since 2015. And to the chief's point on policy violation and internal discipline, the human resources department, which is reporting to the city manager's office, would be contacted for any disciplinary purposes. So there's another level of accountability and just oversight. I just wanted to add that context.
Absolutely. Our fair and impartial policing policy, this is this is one of the accreditation standards for the Michigan Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission. It requires us to do random checks of contacts between our officers and the general public. It includes contacts that are that are initiated by the officer, whether it's a citizen contact by traffic stop or just a casual encounter, supervisors review at least 2 per month per officer and document those in a ledger that is reviewed. They're looking for bias and they're looking for policy violations. This is at least 2 per officer per month. If an officer does not go out on the road, like say a lieutenant, then there wouldn't be really unsupervised contacts to see. But the captain does look through the lieutenant's contacts just to be sure that even the supervisors are acting appropriately. And these audits or these random checks are documented. We publish a annual fair and impartial policing audit every year, and it will tell the public how many blind checks we did or random checks of our personnel to assure that they're not policing with bias. So now that when we talk about random checks, that's just the 2 per month. Our officers, our detective bureau, our supervisors review anything that's a criminal investigation. There's a video attached to it. So of all those 19,000 police contacts, anything that goes to prosecution is reviewed. Anything that's a citizen complaint is reviewed. So I can tell you that we're doing everything in our power to make sure our officers are conducting themselves professionally.
Am I allowed to ask questions along the way?
Yes.
I know that we have an HR director now too who provides a lot of support through this, HR processes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit how the unions fit in a little bit. I didn't see a flow chart here for where they fit in as part of the accountability. Do they have a role?
Where who fits in, Mayor?
The unions?
Through the chair, there's if you go back to the original flow chart proceeding when Chief Emmy was here, what we were attempting to illustrate, really from a bottom up, you have the police officers, which have a collective bargaining unit, then you have the police command, which have a collective bargaining unit. Both of those report upward to the chief. And the human resources does assist the chief and the city manager for negotiating collective bargaining agreements with both of those unions.
Okay, so they're part of the accountability structure.
They're within the department hierarchy in terms of chain of command. And the city manager's office and the human resources department has influence on those policies via the negotiation process.
Through the chair, may I ask a few questions before the chief sits down? Sorry about that. I should have chimed in earlier. I just have a couple of follow-up questions on the last few slides. One is, can citizen complaint dispositions be appealed to the city manager or council?
Yeah, they can be appealed to the chief of police, and then obviously the city manager is inherently in the chain of command, and if anybody was not happy with the results of investigation, and I would offer to sit down and go over the facts of any citizen complaint and let the complainant review the findings and understand how we came to this conclusion. And obviously, at any time, anybody can come before this body and air their grievance. But certainly, we would never prevent somebody from speaking to the city manager. And honestly, I would encourage it.
Is it built into the formal process in any way, or are what you're describing more of a informal understanding?
I guess it's a understood chain of command that I would explain to somebody if they seriously had an issue with our findings. That would be my recommendation, if I would tell them that I'm the department head, I review the investigation, I'm happy to review it with you. If you're not happy with that investigation, I would refer them to the city manager.
Through the chair, to your point, Councilwoman James, there have been a couple of occasions where residents have reached out to me regarding some incidences. And with the chief, we sat down and had lunch with those individuals and talked about the situation and how it came about and what the resolution was. And in both instances, they really turned out very positively. So there is that opportunity. I'm sorry that you weren't aware of that, to this point, that you have the opportunity to reach out to the chief.
No, that's okay. And I think we've all received emails from citizens from time to time that are of that nature. So I just wanted to clarify whether there was any kind of formality in that process.
Councilmember James, it's not a published avenue or a due process or a grievance procedure. It's simply something that if, I would say at the police department, the buck stops on my desk, and if I'm not able to resolve it, the city manager would then come into play.
Understood.
Through the chair, that's consistent with every department for the most part.
Just a couple of quick follow-up questions. And I guess this is more for you, Joe, do you ever kind of randomly audit or review citizen complaints or internal investigations that didn't elevate to the level of coming before you? I know that in the internal investigation process, they may come before you as part of that process. But if they don't elevate to that level, does your office ever audit or review or check in? Or is there any other mechanism where that happens?
We do not have a direct proactive audit, I think is what you're asking. We have a referral audit, and I do have an audit by virtue of the annual police report that is submitted to me. That ultimately, the fair and impartial policing report and the annual police report that summarize the activities are ultimately a deliverable to the city manager as a function of oversight. And then I deliver those publicly to city council.
And then last question, the review by the sheriff's office and the prosecutor's office, if there's the potential for a criminal investigation, is that process codified anywhere, or is that the practice that happens in Oakland County, or something else?
I guess I don't understand the question.
So you described that if there is a potential for that an officer's conduct would be reviewed for potential criminal investigation, you described a investigation by the sheriff's department and by the prosecutor's office. So my question is that process governed by a particular codified policy, either by the county or by the city, or is that just a practice and that is how it has evolved, through time?
That process is laid out in our internal investigation and response to resistance policies, that internal investigations that turn up the possibility of criminal misconduct, that the Ferndale Police Department will not investigate our own personnel in any matter that they may be criminal. Administratively, that is our job to decide whether they violate a policy. But if they violate, criminal law, that's to be investigated by the Sheriff's Department and reviewed by the Oakland County Prosecutor. That is in our policies, which are available on the dashboard. Did that answer your question?
Yes, okay. It did.
Through the chair, you may want to advance the slide to match the context of the conversation.
So if you didn't have any more questions of me, I think I'll turn it back over to Denicia.
So within our research findings, we did speak to the Civil Service Board directly, Councilmember James and I. And we found that a lot of their work that they do has been already duplicated by staff. They're largely underutilized. And they're replaced with collective bargaining agreements. And generally, they just desire more meaningful service responsibility for the city. And then we also took a look at some peer cities. We took a
Can we
look
go
at
back a little bit?
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about the civil service and provide a little bit more context to that? Can you give a little feedback on what you're hearing from the civil service board volunteers? And when did civil service kind of end? We have a...
Through the chair, so, the Civil Service Board is still active, and quickly, could our Assistant City Manager, Kyle Follett, elevate Dan Jacey, our Human Resources Director? Just, he's a valuable asset here, and he might be able to answer some questions
It
as well.
says civil service does not exist anymore. When did it sort of generally end? And our Civil Service Board is still in our charter amendment, or our city charter, and so it's required by charter, right? Is it, or by ordinance?
Sure.
So that particular bullet was more so a direct quote as saying that civil service as an idea.
Yes, and I'm just wondering when the idea ended. So we are practicing, what I'm trying to say is that we're practicing, we have Civil Service Board on our books, required by our city charter, and the idea of civil service ended, but when did it kind of end? Dan Jacey, do you have an idea?
I can't tell you the exact date. I can tell you that since I've been here, its role is definitely what it is now, which is greatly diminished. What I will say happened over time is that as the unions had gained more power and the collective bargaining agreements had become more procedural and ironclad, a lot of the procedures that the Civil Service Board used to handle are now handled through the unions in the grievance process.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you for adding that context.
Absolutely.
And then, can you talk, Councilwoman James, the last bullet point? Sort of what the board members are interested in, or what they've conveyed a little bit more in detail?
Sure. I mean, through the chair, because of sort of the change in practice and the professionalization, I think, of human resources, sort of taking over a lot of what a traditional civil service board might have done. The responsibilities and the activities of civil service boards, not just ours, but in particular ours, have kind of whittled down to not much. So having served on this board previously, and having spoken to the current board members, there's just not much on the agenda, if anything, and there are actually limitations as to what the board can actually do because of collective bargaining agreements and duties being taken over by HR professionals. So these board members sort of feel like they show up to meetings periodically, are given not a heck of a lot of information to review, and not a heck of a lot of responsibility in just sort of, I guess, ratifying that basically the steps that should have taken place to, make a new hire or redefine a job description, or if there's some kind of disciplinary action. All the work has been done. They see a little bit of information, approve it. It's not terribly meaningful, and probably a waste of some talents and volunteer energy.
Thank you. I appreciate that context. All right, thanks, Denicia, for the pause.
So looking at our peer city research, we did take a look at the city of Kalamazoo, who has a Citizens Public Safety Review and Appeal Board, where plaintiffs can appeal the police chief's findings to the board, and then the board can then determine whether the chief's decision is correct or incorrect, or they can decide to stay neutral. And then a referral goes to the city manager for considering the chief's decision. And then the board can't change the discipline that was given out, but they can recommend training and procedural change recommendations. And then the City of Decatur has their Better Together Advisory Board, where members can come together to review policies, identify potential barriers, and make recommendations regarding equity to city staff for their city commission's approval. Along with the peer city research, we did take a look at the Department of Justice citizen review of police, their approaches and implementation, and then we took a look at NACO, which is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, their guidebook for implementation. And what we found was that both of the publications emphasize the importance of qualifications required for a board of this nature being inclusive to multiple cultural organizations within the city, and ensuring that they're members with some experience in the criminal justice field. And so additional attention to the makeup of the board would be required once the specific responsibilities of the board are decided upon. So for considerations, we believe that a new board or commission would be more suited to take on a community police advisory role for the city, as I mentioned before, with careful thought and consideration given to the duties and responsibilities. And so we would like council to consider recommending the Ordinance Committee to convene to draft a baseline ordinance for the board. And so the Ordinance Committee is a subcommittee created by the City Council to undertake investigation, review, development of proposed ordinances that might be recommended to council, so a board of this nature. And then the Ordinance Committee consists of 2 council members, our city manager, assistant city manager, city attorney, and our city clerk. And so next steps look like March through May for the Ordinance Committee legal review and the first draft of the ordinance. In May, we're looking at a public progress update meeting hosted by the Ordinance Committee. And then June, the Ordinance Committee has final reviews, and then July would be the adoption of the ordinance.
For the chair, Denicia, do you want to say who the 2 city council members are, because the public might not know?
I believe that's you, Councilmember James, and Councilmember Mikulski. That's all for me.
And so tonight is a discussion. Are we passing a motion tonight? The action tonight is to direct the Ordinance Committee to work with the attorney to review the peer policies and ordinance. But I wanted to open up to council if the presentation has concluded, and open up to council for questions for Denicia and the chief, and or Dan Jacey, and or the city manager.
Through the chair, just one more sort of just clarification, because I want to make sure it didn't get lost in your presentation. But am I correct that you're recommending that even though we have determined that the Civil Service Board is nearing the end of its life, and we may want to reconsider how it moves forward, you're recommending that the Ordinance Committee draft a baseline ordinance establishing an advisory board that's separate and apart from the Civil Service Board, so those won't be connected?
Yes.
They won't be connected, but over time, we don't want them to also duplicate work too. So there's at a point where we'll have to wind down the Civil Service Board, which would have to go to the residents on a ballot initiative to remove it. So otherwise, if it's not removed, we're required by law to keep holding them following the outlines in the city charter and appointing people who have told us that it's no longer worth their time to be on the Civil Service Board. So this, I think, for me, the ordinance allows a lot more flexibility for the city to adjust with the times, rather than going to a city charter vote, and can amend the purpose, the roles and duties of the commission over time. Is that everybody's understanding with the ordinance? Okay.
Through the chair, it might be helpful to add, there is, for a charter amendment, there is a significant state mandated timeline that we don't have control over. And so the abilities to consider an ordinance adoption balanced against meeting that timeline objective was going to be challenging this year. So I think what I'm hearing Denicia say is the recommendation is to first engage in the ordinance adoption, and then if that's adopted, that could then replace some of the functionality of that board, which would give us the ability to have some charter amendment language the following year, if council chooses to move that way.
Okay. So we're going to build the new thing with the community, and then unwind the thing that no longer serves this community. Put in layman's terms. Right? Okay. Do we need to put a motion on the floor first and then have discussion? Okay, and I know that we wanted to do public comment. Should I do that now, or should I do that after the motion?
Allow for public input as to the motion?
Not the motion, the motion's to Ordinance Committee, but what council should consider going forward as for the Ordinance Committee and the City Council to consider moving forward on this particular model for creating an advisory committee.
Your Honor, if you wish additional public comment on the general issue, you could allow for that right now before the motion. If a motion's made, then it's going to be deliberations and questions as it relates to the motion.
Okay. So then I will open up public comment now to give feedback and ask some questions of council, if there's anybody who is willing to provide comment. Just like we do with public comment, I'll start with the chamber. Whoever's in the chamber would like to make some comments. So I'm going to open up public comment at 9:14. And if there's anybody in the chamber who would like to make a comment or a question, please, Kat, come on up.
Sure, thank you. These masks. All right. I was just wondering, since I'm kind of a lay person to city ordinances, I wouldn't know necessarily what boundaries or limitations there might be with an ordinance guided pathway toward the community advisory board. So it might be helpful to, to lay that out, to provide the community with some information about, I wouldn't even know what the pros and cons are of going down this pathway versus like another pathway. So I can't ask intelligent questions is kind of my point. So it might be helpful to have some information if there's anything that you can provide about that.
Yep, really great question. I think we were modeling this after the short-term rental ordinance in terms of some steering or not residents providing input on the design of the ordinance once there's some drafts produced for giving comment. Am I correct?
Yes, through the chair, the process for ordinance development and public feedback would be consistent with that. I think the question might be what would a board formed through an ordinance look like? And I think a comparable, we have several, the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission is an example of a public board given a specific scope or mandate and a specific description of duties. That would be a good example of what a board formed via an ordinance would look like. So the same would be here, and then the city has to execute via that ordinance structure, if that makes sense.
Yep. Just to summarize, you know, some of the values of the approach to finding what is the next best thing for Ferndale for a community policing commission was, I think it was that had to fit our staffing structure. It had to be within our budget capabilities. Some big city models can't fit in a small city. We just don't have the staffing capacity to maintain some of these, and this is what the research was all done about. Am I missing anything else? Those were the two that come to mind. Was there anything else? And that there was an engagement process as part of whatever we wrote.
Yeah.
And flexibility, because the charter is too constrained to change with the times, right? We could have had we could have done something with 21st century policing when the police department unrolled it, right? But the charter wouldn't allow it to go into the civil service board. Those are some examples, I think, that we didn't have the flexibility to do. Does that help?
It does. I have two more specific questions then. One, there's a series of 5 bullet points in the anti-racism statement. Would this pathway allow for those to all be met? That's one question. And then the second question is, well, community advisory boards need to have a certain level of safety for people to participate as members of the community, and I'm wondering if this pathway would allow for that. And by safety, I mean some impartiality, some separation in some ways from powers that be, so that people who maybe don't feel as comfortable interacting with city council could come forward and share, be part of a body like that. Meaning maybe not necessarily city council appointed, or an external impartial body appointed. Is that part of how this could look? Is that like part of the way in the city ordinance? Does that make sense?
Yes, and I would respond, if I may, take the liberty. I'm not sure we have all the answers to those questions yet, and I think that would be designed as part of the ordinance committee process and engagement when drafts are ready. From my experience rewriting the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission, you've got to get very clear on your purpose and your why, and then your responsibilities of what that advisory committee is going to be doing, the commission. Because what happens, and all the research has said, if the volunteers who are on these commissions feel like they aren't contributing in a meaningful way, because there's a mismatch of roles and responsibilities and the processes that are put in place for review already, can cause some consternation and frustrations. And I think those are some of the pros and cons that will be discussed as how to set this up. I think what you're seeing is you have commitment from council to figure this out, but we don't have all the answers, and we're going to figure them out with the community about how it should function, with some guidelines and research coming in from the Department of Justice and what these other cities our like-minded cities are doing. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Does anybody want to build on what I said, or did I cover that adequately?
I'm going to reserve my comments till the end, but I do have some additions.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to speak for you. This is a big thing for you. Something that this is, that you have put forward as the initiative, and so I don't want to overstep my speaking. So just correct me if I'm okay. Is there anybody else in the council chambers that would like to speak or have a comment? All right, sorry, Denicia, I'm going to have to make you go over the laptop.
No need, Mayor.
Oh, Kyle's got you.
No rest.
We forgot you were lurking out there in the ceiling.
Oh, I'm watching.
Through the chair, Denicia, could you show that timeline again, please?
Yep. Remember, we still are in public comment, so Kyle is still going through. Is there anybody online that would like to give a comment on this item?
No, Mayor, there are no hand raisers.
Yeah. So while there may be no hand raisers tonight, there will be other opportunities to give comment. This is just the beginning and start. So we look forward to having that engagement. Seeing no one else online, I'm going to close public comment at 9:21, and we'll lead it back to the council dais here and honor Councilwoman Leaks May. You're not James. Leaks May. Question to Denicia. Thanks you.
I was just wondering, it says, so I just wonder if there is some opportunity, that's quite a bit of time between March and May for the public, will the public progress be updated strictly in May, or will it be updated throughout? I think that's going to be important to kind of know.
So there would, yeah. May I rephrase your question? Are there only 2 opportunities for engagement? One in May and one in June? Or is there more than that?
Thank you.
Is that what you?
Yes, it just looks like quite a gap there.
As designed right now, March through May is time for the Ordinance Committee to convene meetings, study, review the legal basis and the general draft framework, and then put together a progress update in May. That is the opportunity for the public to hear the results of thus far the first draft. And then where there's feedback opportunities, the Ordinance Committee can then insert that. If there's questions, we can look to answer those questions, or if there's opportunities, we can consider that, and then we would come back to June for a final adoption. And again, this mirrors the process we took with the short-term rental, which also was of significant public interest.
I could, through the chair, there's also, on the Ordinance Committee, the subcommittee consists of 2 members of council, and if those members of council thought it was appropriate to have additional input or pause or needed additional refinement on an area, I think that would certainly be something that could happen and would be communicated with council collectively.
Okay.
As the administrator, I would always throw the caveat, with staffing capacity in consideration.
Okay. I know through the anti-racist ordinance, which was done very quickly to respond to the moment, because we felt the need, that, we got comments, city council members got comments from residents via email and phone calls, and that was not a typical time frame in which we do something like that. To me, this is going to be a lot like the short-term rental ordinance, where we put it out there. Residents will be able to email council, call us, also show up at the public council meeting, which is the formal way for us to accept those. But you can also write emails and submit those as questions and concerns as part of the process. So, I mean, we've been studying this and talking about this for how long now? Too long. Too long. And I know there's been some criticism. It's been too long. And so everybody on council wants to be mindful and get it right, but also get it done so that we can move on and start practicing and honoring what was in our anti-racism declaration, but also honoring what the residents have asked, right? So, are there any questions or comments from council? If not, we should entertain a motion so that we can debate and continue discussion.
Through the chair, well, what I have may be necessary after a motion is made.
So,
They're questions, but I don't know if they can be answered.
Dan Christ, I have a number of sort of comments that I want to make that really are more about kind of why we're doing this and ideas of how it might look, are those comments more properly made outside of the context of debating council's referral of this to the Ordinance Committee, or are those properly within that
Well,
debate?
respectfully, is maybe outside the framework of the proposed motion, which hasn't been made yet, but certainly if you want to give context to what you might be bringing to the committee as it starts its exercise of deliberating and trying to refine a recommendation that it's going to make to council, I think it's appropriate if you wish to say what you want to say on it.
All right, if I may, through the chair.
Please go
shall I
ahead.
do that
I'm glad
before
you
we-
asked that question because I wasn't sure where to insert it.
Sure. If I can have the floor for just a minute or two. One, I want to circle back to Kat Latasha's question about sort of, if I understood your question correctly, you might have been asking about sort of what are the pros and cons and the differences between proceeding by establishing a board or commission through a charter amendment versus establishing one through an ordinance. And then I think a resolution is the third possibility for how a commission, board, or task force might be established. And part of the reason that we sort of went down this path of considering whether or not the Civil Service Board might be an appropriate way of looking at this is because there are differences between when a group is established by charter, ordinance, or resolution. Revising the city charter is a very heavy lift and requires a vote by Ferndale voters. So in some ways, that creating or amending a board or commission by charter arguably has a longer lasting effect because once it's on the books, it's much harder to change, which is both a pro and a con, I think. And in this process, while I had hoped to consider gaining the benefit of that longevity, I think I learned that it would be an extraordinarily heavy lift to try and craft just the right composition and authorities and tasks for this board with public input in a timeline sufficient to also, get ballot language that would be approved by the state in a timely manner, and also be launching into a campaign for Ferndale voters to adopt it, so that completing the task of launching this board, which has taken already too long, doing that through a charter revision would have taken even longer. So that is, I think, why we're landing on sort of separating those processes. And I think I've also come personally to the conclusion that doing this by ordinance, I think there is actually a benefit in flexibility, so that after this group gets established, if there are, bumps that need to be smoothed out or additional duties that this group might be tasked with, it's easier to update an ordinance than it is to go back and revise the charter all over again. So that's just sort of my view of why we've landed on the process that we've landed on. But sort of looking at the why are we doing this in the first place, from time to time, that question comes up. I think folks who are sort of deeply embedded in these issues, the why is not very difficult at all. But for folks who maybe haven't thought about it before or aren't entrenched in these issues, it seems odd to some people to be establishing a board to be advising a police department. But we know that, I think a lot more people know than maybe they did 10, 15 years ago, that nationwide we can see systemic concerns inherent in law enforcement. There are plenty of studies published on disproportionate impacts of everything from stops to searches to ticketing to uses of force leading to deadly force and loss of liberty short of deadly force. And the policing community is sort of easily siloed from the civilian community. And there are language and communication barriers that can arise where, even good faith, good-natured conversations can be hard because of a very, very different language and understanding of operations and structures. Now, in Ferndale, there has been a regional reputation for misconduct over the years. That's something that we've been grappling with for a very long time, something that I'd like to think we've made a lot of progress at, but it's also a reality that we can't quite ignore. Some of the benefits that come out of having an advisory board is to really build trust and improve the reputation of the law enforcement agency, and building trust and relationships sort of bilaterally with law enforcement and community. And in Ferndale, as I understand it, in 2016, prior to my serving on council, the council adopted the 21st century community policing model, which does include defining the appropriate form and structure of civilian oversight to meet the needs of the community. And another point that I want to include are to recognize the correlation between poverty, urban decay, and unemployment to quality of life, the breakdown of community cohesion, and the increase of crime. Link economic development and poverty reduction to longer-term problem-solving strategies for addressing crime. And the reason that I sort of read those two action items from the 21st century policing model is because as we sort of enter this phase of figuring out what this board is going to look like, what their duties might be, I know that there is sort of a tension between the concept of focusing on our police department versus looking at, inequities or human rights concerns that can arise in any city department. And I'm cognizant of that balance and how sort of non-law enforcement policies can connect to law enforcement in the sense that there can sometimes be a sort of a causal link, that if you're providing for people's needs and improving the conditions for your community, it might potentially, hopefully, reduce and eliminate law enforcement contacts. So that's something that I think we're grappling with as we move forward. I would like to think that this board would engage with the city manager's office on review and oversight procedures, provide a community engagement and transparency level in the process, while being mindful of costs and resources that go along with the different models for these boards. I think that there's likely room for engaging in discussions and making recommendations for proactive policies and programs for crime prevention, looking at the root causes of crime, looking for opportunities for community-led stewardship and mutual aid, review and make recommendations for policy and training updates, engage in innovative recruiting for new and diverse officers, to educate the community and potentially organize around legislative reforms that are needed to improve the quality of the criminal justice system, explore partnerships or programs from nonprofit organizations or other untapped resources that we haven't been able to tap into as a city quite yet. So, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic that we can sort of thread that needle and figure out how to craft this body so that it can really be an asset and a benefit and help continue to move our police department toward, you know, the progressive and future-oriented department that we would like to see, and that we're seeing the evolution of. So I hope I covered, you know, some of the concerns and thoughts that have arisen. I know I haven't covered all of them, and that there's a lot more to think about here. But I'm really glad that we're finally getting to the point of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, of having something meaningful for this body to vote on and make it a reality. So thank you. Sorry that was a little long-winded, but I appreciate it.
And also, I wanted to add on top of all that, and you mentioned, I mean, you listed off so many eloquent things. I think we're all just council is trying to be thoughtful, deliberate, and making sure we're crafting the best path forward for the city. And there are a lot of interests on council that we need to manage as well, because there are a lot of point of views and a lot of information being brought into the conversation from everybody up here. So, which is also a reflection of what they're hearing from the community members as well. And I just appreciate everybody spending so much time trying to figure this out.
I did have one more thing that I forgot to kind of rattle off on my list, that it was really fortuitous that we were actually talking about the police data dashboard today. That was like the perfect kind of launch pad for this discussion, where you know, it's my hope that this board would have the opportunity to review this really significant data and, you know, dig into it a little bit deeper and peel away some layers and engage with the chief and command staff about you know, what this information means and what changes might be recognized you know, as a result of some of the information that it yields. So sorry that I forgot to mention that.
And I'm looking at continuation of department culture, alignment with city culture of our values, which are up on the wall, and also policies change all the time, and I think that's going to be a good responsibility of this board, of addressing new policies as they come down from the federal level, and how do we adapt and, you know, implement those at the local level. And I know there's a lot changing at the state police department. They're getting, you know, some criticism too. So all departments, I think, are trying to change and adjust and integrate policies as they change. I don't know. I feel like I'm just talking now. I'm going to end. You were so eloquent. Is there a comment from you? Yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
I have two questions that, again, I don't think can be answered today, but I really, I've asked these questions a number of times, and I'm hoping that this group of people, the Ordinance Committee and staff working together over the next couple of months, can eventually answer these questions. And the first one is, what is the objective of this advisory board? And what problem exists within the city of Ferndale that we're trying to resolve? Because every committee, commission, board that we have created answer those two questions in their creation.
I think that Councilwoman James has taken a really great draft stab at that, and that's going to come out in the draft ordinance for us to react to. And honestly, I'm really curious and open to exploring how any human rights elements might overlap with this, because those are some questions and comments I'm also getting from residents in the community.
I as well.
And we just can't take on more ordinance committees. Every ordinance committee that we add on takes staffing and capacity, and you know, our staffing is limited. So we're being very mindful, and I think City Council put in a ordinance or some direction to city manager, well, I don't know what, 2 years ago, is that we need to understand budget and staffing constraints when a new commission is being proposed, which really hasn't been done in the past. So those are part of the process now. So thank you, Councilman Polika, for your questions. I've heard you, and I know Councilwoman James has heard you as well. All right. We need a motion to proceed.
Let's see, I'll pull it up and move to direct the Ordinance Committee to work with City Attorney to review peer policies, ordinances, and documents and draft a baseline ordinance for a community police advisory board.
Moved by James and seconded by Mikulski. Madam Clerk.
I'm sorry, through the chair. I just want to make a comment. And this is just, you know, my comment, my opinion. I know that there are a lot of issues throughout the country in regards to police and citizen interactions. Creating an advisory board won't necessarily resolve issues outside of Ferndale. If there are people within our community that have great mistrust of our police department, I think the only way to reduce their fears and their mistrust is through positive interaction with police, and not necessarily a group of citizens reviewing policies and then telling people they no longer need to fear our police. So, thank you for allowing me that moment.
All right, there is a motion on the floor. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem James?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. And that passes unanimously. I send my gratitude to the Ordinance Committee for your work ahead. Next up on the agenda is call to council, and we start with the city manager and department updates. Take it away, Joe.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me look at my list here. We will begin with our Finance Director, Phil Whitfield. Kyle Denicia is still at the lectern. Could you please assist and elevate Phil to speak?
None. Good evening, all. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, cool. I just wanted to bring a couple of things to the residents' attention. The last day to pay any 2021 summer and winter taxes is Monday, February 28th, 2022. We recommend that residents verify their zero balance due prior to February 28th. The 2022 notice of assessments will be mailed out by the end of February as well. And that was it for finance.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Next, we have an update from Emmanuel Johnson from our Parks and Recreation Department. Emmanuel.
Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, just a quick update from Parks and Recreation. We want to invite the community out to our Blizzard Blast that we'll be holding on Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. at Martin Road Park. The Blizzard Blast will be a quick mini festival where we'll have a number of different events and activities that include nature crafts, snowshoeing, snow art, and s'mores. The event is completely free to the public, so all you need to do is show up and come out and have fun with us. Other than that, we also want to make sure that everybody is aware that adult softball registration has opened. You were able to go ahead and register at our registration site. We also have registration available for youth baseball and girls softball. That'll be upcoming with games to start in June. And that's it from Parks and Rec.
Excellent. Thank you, Emmanuel. I heard the soccer registration closed in record speed. I think there's a lot of eager residents looking to get back out there to recreate.
Yeah, soccer year over year continues to gain momentum.
I know there's a lot of parents hungry for it too, present company included. Next, we have an update from our HR Director, Dan Jacey. We may have to come back to Dan. I'll give Kara Sokol, our Communications Director, an opportunity to jump in.
Likes to sleep after this meeting. Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to answer a question that we got a lot of. About a week ago, we had a snow emergency, and we have a very strict protocol for the communications process we follow during that. One of the main pieces of that is text alerts for people who have signed up for them. And for the first time, not everybody received this text alert. We got a lot of questions about whether people need to re-sign up for them, whether we stopped doing them, whether we switched services. The answer to all of the above is no. The day after we did our text alert, we got an email from the company we use that they were no longer going to be sending out messages with a certain kind of shortened URL link. We use a site called Bitly to condense our URLs. And so I think it has to do with an iPhone update. So some iPhone users did not receive this message, and that's a significant number of people. So that has been corrected in our process, and we'll make sure that that doesn't happen again. So if you are already signed up for text alerts, you should get them about anything that impacts parking going forward. If you're not and you would like to be, I would just remind people to go to parkferndale.com. Under the top resources tab, there's an option that says subscribe to text alerts, and that is what will get you those alerts. That's it.
Thank you, Kara. I believe Dan Jacey is available now.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to tell you about our recent cultural sensitivity trainings. Kira Khan, our deputy clerk and a member of our racial equity action team, researched and found IND, the Islamic Network Group, to provide cultural sensitivity workshops to all of our employees. ING is dedicated to building a more inclusive and equitable America. ING provided 7 cultural sensitivity sessions so far, so that every member of staff can attend. These workshops began with the history of how biased narratives about different groups of people were formed and framed in history, and then embedded in culture institutionally and through implicit bias. It then shifted to a panel discussion of the shared experiences of marginalized groups, and each of these groups were represented by someone on the panel. These groups included Muslim Americans, Jewish Americans, Indigenous people, African Americans, Latinx Americans, and Asian Americans. The workshop ended with a 30-minute small group brainstorming session yielding ideas that the city can put into action to help us work toward cultural equity. We're excited to compile this information and create a plan of action to implement some of the top ideas. The training program was really well received, and we got a lot of really great participation, and we're really excited to partner with IT.
Thank you, Dan. I would also add, for the public's knowledge, because you don't necessarily see this, the Racial Equity Action Team is an internal team of staff, and they've also done an excellent job of creating an awareness and promotional campaign in celebration of Black History Month. So they've been circulating really incredible stories to promote Black History Month within the organization for every email address, and that does include City Council as well. So we hope to promote some of those efforts. That happens behind the scenes, but one of our core objectives is to, again, foster and promote our cultural values within the organization, and this team has been doing an excellent job of that. Next, I think that wraps up our staff's announcements. I will finish with just a reminder that City Hall and city offices are closed during President's Day next week, and observance of President's Day, which is part of our ordinances. We are aligned with the state's holiday observances. But there will not be an impact on curbside collection services, according to the DPW director. And that will be all.
Thank you. Moving on to call the audience with city council members. And tonight I'm going to start with the Mayor Pro Tem James.
Thank you. I have two quick items tonight. One, the city manager kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I was going to thank the Racial Equity Action Team for those Black History Month emails. I know Denicia gets a lot of the credit because she has the task of sending those emails out, but I know it's a collective effort, and it has been great information. I hope that maybe at some point we'll have an opportunity to share some of that information, maybe on social media or something. If that doesn't end up being feasible this year, maybe that can be on our wish list for next year, because I do think it's really great content, and I appreciate the work that went into it. Also, I wanted to let folks know that I'll be hosting a community conversation on our lead service line replacement program, because I love the sexy topics. On Thursday, February 24th from 7 to 8 p.m. The idea behind this is to sort of give a background refresher on the legislative mandate that launched this program, get a brief update as to the work performed to date, a projection for the next year or two on the work planned, and really just a kind of a reminder to the community that many of us, myself included, have a lead service line. We need to have some mitigation measures in place in our homes, including filtered water for consumption, especially for cooking, because lead does not get boiled out of water. It just gets intensified in boiled water. And also kind of an update on what's happening at the county, state, and federal levels with an eye toward opportunities for funding this project, because it's a heavy lift in our budget. So to dive a little bit deeper into that, please join us next Thursday via Zoom. I will put that information out on my council member Facebook page tomorrow. And Kara, what other places can folks find that information if they are smart enough not to be on Facebook?
Yeah, so we're going to put it on the city's social media pages as well, but also it should actually be there. If not, it'll be there tomorrow morning. It's going on the city's website on the homepage under events. So all the information will be available there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman James. And I'm going to head over to my left and start with Councilwoman Leaks May.
Okay.
Or continue on.
All right. I had everything kind of ready to go, and now I think I've forgotten everything. All right. So. You know what? I just went blank. Why don't you go, and then I go?
I will refer to the mayor to decide
Thank you.
if she wants to go
Thank
next.
you. I should have written it down.
I randomize every
Yeah,
time.
well,
we have a company,
You're
so-
going to be disappointed because I got nothing this week.
Okay, well, randomize.
Okay.
Mayor, I only have one item tonight. I wanted to remind folks that this Thursday at 6 p.m. is the Ferndale Arts and Cultural Commission meeting. This is a great commission to join. There are plenty of opportunities to join the commission. So please, if you're interested in doing something and maybe you applied at the task force and got passed up, this is a great moment to come out to the Arts and Cultural Commission. 6 p.m. affirmations this Thursday. And I believe the city website says 6:30. We might need to adjust that.
Thank you. And I just have one comment, observation of the information I'm taking in. With all the more recent snows, it comes up every time after a heavy snowfall when people don't shovel their sidewalks. And the expectation of city code enforcement to be ticketing everybody. There's some limitations on what our code enforcement is able to do. So I'm hoping to have a conversation with you, Joe, a little bit about what our process was for the last 2 snowfalls on code enforcement with businesses and homeowners not ticketing. There really is a church in my neighborhood who won't shovel at all, and it's really causing safe passage for their patrons and for the residents in the neighborhood. So when we have folks like businesses like that, how do we, leverage our code enforcement in order to, help with enforcement? So those are the conversations I want to revisit, which is kind of what we do every year, but I think it's appropriate. Who knows if we'll get any more snow in February or even March, but I think we got snow in March, end of March last year, surprise snow, so it warrants a conversation.
Mayor, can I react to your comment?
Huh?
So I've received communications very similar to yours, and if not identical to yours. And one thing that I do know is there are a number of seniors who don't have the capacity to shovel their snow, and they don't have the financial capabilities of hiring someone to shovel their snow. And in those instances, there are programs, not through the city, through the county actually, through, I'm going to forget the name, OLSA, that seniors can apply to have someone come out and actually shovel your snow. It's no cost to you. We actually contribute to it as a community to OLSA. So I would encourage any seniors who don't have that capacity to shovel your snow to please contact OLSA, or you can contact the city and ask for Joe, and Joe can give you the information.
And through the chair, I'm happy to work with the communications department to reprise the workflow process. For code enforcement, snow abatement is similar to other code violations. It's call and response. So we do only have a handful of folks out there in the field, and they have day-to-day jobs on top of snow emergency events. So, but there is a process for the public to report issues, communicate them, and for us to be alerted to them and respond and go inspect and follow up.
Yeah.
So I will work with communications on reprising that and making sure that that process is clear.
Yeah, and I think, council can help set the expectation. We don't have code enforcement on the prowl every day after a snowstorm, looking for people who haven't shoveled. We just don't have the staff capacity to do that type of intense service delivery. And I apologize, but that we don't have that intensity of service that some people are looking for. But I know that Councilwoman Mikulski has brought up some new ideas that we should be considering for, assisting with snow removal for seniors above and beyond OLSA. And I hope that we can start taking a look at how do we do that better for starting this, looking at what can we put in place, if anything, this year and or getting ready for next year as well. And so new ideas are coming forth from council members, and I think we need to take a look at it with snow removal. And there's a huge movement in the active transportation network that I'm involved in, is that if we can clear our roads so well, why can't we clear sidewalks for people walking and biking for mobility and accessibility? And one of the big reasons is budgetary, and trying to figure it out. So our city has been making small steps forward in that our Downtown Development Authority is making some pathways in our downtown for all the business owners. But when you look at why isn't the city plowing all the sidewalks, it's a budgetary constraint. We don't have the budget to do that, which is why we rely on business owners and residents to help us pull the weight. But when you have inconsistencies on a sidewalk, it creates dangerous conditions for people who are biking and walking their dogs and or have mobility devices. And so I think that this is going to become a bigger conversation in the active transportation and accessibility of communities, and the realities of budget versus realities of, if you can clear your roads, why can't you clear your sidewalks? People commute that way too. And I think those are going to be future conversations we're going to be countering more often, because it's happening elsewhere already.
If I may, through the chair to kind of speak on that. About a week ago, I was in front of a local business and slipped on ice in front of that business and but sprained my hand. It's not a fracture, so I can really attest to that, how the importance to getting out there and getting that ice, because
it's dangerous.
It's very dangerous, and it can be life-changing. Mayor, I do recall what I was going to say, may I?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry about that. I have a lot on my mind these days, but I just really wanted to really thank University High School, the students, just this past week, and the Ferndale Area District Library for collaborating with the Pete's and Politics. It was so wonderful to kind of speak with the university students, and even a couple of them admitted that they may want to even go into politics one day, so it kind of encouraged me a little bit. We had very candid conversations, and it was a really rewarding experience. And I also like to share that as your council member, I was selected to be appointed to the MML Board of Trustees.
Yay,
so I'm really excited about that. Looking forward to representing Ferndale. I have great feet to, a great
partner to work with.
To work with, and I can't fill those shoes, but I've learned a lot from you, so I'm excited about this role. So thank you for your mentorship in that. And also, happy Valentine's Day. And that's it.
Thank you. Well, I also wanted to say, getting appointed to the Board of Trustees is all about volunteering for the MML and doing the work in order to be considered to be appointed to the Board of Trustees as a committed representative of a community. So you did a lot of that all on your own, and I thank you for representing Ferndale at MML, and I look forward to you bringing new ideas and projects and opportunities to the city because of your board membership. That's what happens. Staff will love you because you'll bring them more opportunities for things to work on. They love it when council members do that. Thanks. All right, with that, folks, I'm calling it. It is 10:04, and thanks for attending tonight and being with us, and we will see you next time on the Ferndale Council Show.
Record.